records were being shattered, nations were racing for bragging rights, and steam power was being pushed harder than ever thought possible. In the middle of that pressure came a German locomotive so fast it rewrote expectations and then slipped quietly out of history. Only 3 were ever built, and almost nothing tangible remains today. Known as the DRG Class 05, these ultra-streamlined machines emerged during the speed race of the 1930s and vanished before the world fully grasped their potential. Why were there only 3? What happened to them, and why are they still talked about today? Across the industrial world of the 1930s, speed had turned into a public scoreboard. Nations were no longer competing only on maps or battlefields, but through machines that could move faster than anyone else's. Cars, aircraft, engines, and railways became symbols of progress, power, and technical dominance. A faster machine suggested a smarter nation, a stronger economy, and a future that felt closer than ever. Germany followed every headline closely, watching Britain's Gresly Pacifics thunder across the rails, America's streamlined Hudsons capture attention, and France push experimental limits of motion. Matching those achievements was never the real goal. The ambition went further. The goal was to outpace them so clearly that no comparison would be possible. That ambition shaped a radical decision inside the Reichsbahn. This would not be another reliable workhorse meant to quietly move passengers day after day. The order was for something bold, visually unforgettable, and technically aggressive. The locomotive had to make a statement before it even moved an inch. From that mindset came the DRG Class 05, a trio of machines numbered 05001, 05002, and 05003. They looked like they belonged to a future that never fully arrived, even by modern standards. When the first of them rolled out in 1935, reactions were mixed between awe and disbelief. Steam locomotives were expected to show strength through exposed machinery, visible motion, and raw mechanical presence. The 05 erased nearly all of that. Its body was wrapped in smooth steel from nose to cab, hiding pistons, rods, and wheels behind curved panels. The front tapered into a sharp aerodynamic point that felt closer to aviation design than railway tradition. Air flowed cleanly across its surface with no obvious gaps or interruptions. The locomotive barely appeared to breathe. Even the cab windows were reduced to narrow slits, giving the crew limited visibility in exchange for a perfectly sealed shape. It looked less like a machine built from decades of steam practice and more like a moving experiment in pure speed. That beauty came with serious consequences. Heat built up rapidly inside the casing, turning the cab into an exhausting environment. Crews worked in temperatures that pushed physical limits, especially during longer runs. Maintenance crews faced even worse challenges. Inspecting or repairing components meant removing large steel panels that were heavy, awkward, and time-consuming to handle. Tasks that were routine on conventional locomotives became labor-intensive operations. None of that bothered the planners behind the project. The Class 05 was never meant to be convenient. It was built to dominate headlines, photographs, and record books. Among the 3, 05002 became the centerpiece of history. On May 11th, 1936, Germany prepared for an all-out attempt to seize the world steam speed record from Britain. Everything had to be perfect, bearings were polished, coal quality was carefully selected, and the run was scheduled under ideal weather conditions. Track alignment, timing, and crew coordination were pushed to extremes. Everyone involved understood that the attempt carried risk, both mechanical and human. When the locomotive accelerated, it did so with an intensity few had witnessed before. The result stunned the world. A measured speed of 200.4 kilometers per hour, equal to 124.5 miles per hour, was recorded. For a steam locomotive in the 1930s, the number felt unreal. Crowds reacted with excitement. Newspapers printed dramatic headlines, and Germany briefly held the title of the fastest steam-powered rail vehicle on Earth. yet the aftermath felt strangely restrained. There were no endless victory tours, no repeated attempts to push the number higher, and no sustained effort to turn the record into a long-term publicity machine. Behind the scenes, doubts were growing. The record had proven what the 05 could do under perfect conditions, but daily reality told a different story. The Class 05 delivered extreme speed at a steep cost. Heat management bordered on unmanageable, visibility remained poor, and mechanical stress constantly flirted with dangerous limits. Firemen worked relentlessly to maintain output, shoveling coal at a pace that exhausted even experienced crews. Drivers operated with limited forward view, relying on familiarity and discipline rather than comfort. These locomotives performed brilliantly only when conditions aligned perfectly. Railways rarely operate in perfect conditions. That mismatch created a quiet realization that the Class 05, for all its brilliance, did not solve practical transportation problems. The situation became even more complex with the arrival of 05003. This locomotive was not a simple continuation of the original design. Engineers rethought nearly everything. The cab was moved to the front, dramatically improving visibility. Boiler concepts were revised, internal layouts were reorganized, and the entire operating environment was reimagined to reduce heat and improve crew efficiency. On paper, 05003 addressed many of the flaws that plagued its sisters. It felt like a refined evolution rather than another prototype. Yet its service history remained limited. It covered fewer miles, received fewer major assignments, and spent much of its existence treated as a technical curiosity rather than a flagship. By the time it was ready to prove itself, confidence in the entire concept had already begun to fade. The Reichsbahn was questioning whether extreme streamlining and record chasing aligned with the realities of rail operation. That doubt arrived at the worst possible moment. World War II changed priorities instantly. Speed records lost all relevance in a world focused on logistics, supply chains, and survival. Railways needed locomotives that could haul heavy loads reliably, operate under harsh conditions, and tolerate imperfect maintenance. Flashy machines designed for precision runs no longer made sense. The Class 05 demanded pristine track, high-quality fuel, and dedicated crews willing to manage its demands. Wartime rail networks needed durable machines that could keep moving no matter the circumstances. Against that backdrop, the 05 felt increasingly out of place. As the war progressed, the trio was sidelined. Heavy freight locomotives took center stage while the streamlined speed champions were stored, reassigned, or quietly ignored. Each passing month made their design philosophy feel more disconnected from reality. When the war ended, Germany faced urgent rebuilding needs, but the future of rail was already shifting. Diesel and electric locomotives were spreading across the world, offering cleaner operation, lower maintenance demands, and simpler crew requirements. Steam power was entering its final chapter. For the Class 05, the post-war years brought an unexpected loss of identity. Their streamlining was removed piece by piece. The pointed noses disappeared, side panels were stripped away, and the smooth shells that once defined them were dismantled. Without the casing, the truth became clear. Beneath the steel skin, the locomotives looked largely conventional. The visual magic that made them legendary vanished almost overnight. Observers barely recognized them afterward, as if the machines had been reduced to shadows of their former selves. That transformation sealed their fate. Without streamlining, their performance advantages disappeared. Maintenance costs remained high. Compatibility with the rest of the fleet was poor, and their appearance felt outdated next to emerging diesel and electric designs. Discussions about preservation did take place in the early 1950s. Saving one would have required enormous investment. Years of storage had caused structural issues, restoration costs were high, and national priorities focused on rebuilding cities and infrastructure. In the end, Practicality 1. One by one, all 3 locomotives were scrapped quietly, without ceremonies or public farewell. The destruction left behind an unsettling question. Some engineering reports suggested the Class 05 had more speed potential that was never explored. With different track conditions, further tuning, and sustained development, higher speeds may have been achievable. Estimates ranged beyond 210 kilometers per hour, possibly even higher. No surviving machine remained to test those theories. The opportunity vanished with the scrap metal. Today, the name DRG Class 05 still carries weight among rail enthusiasts. Photographs of the sleek nose and smooth body continue to circulate, often looking unreal, even by modern standards. The recorded speed remains staggering when placed in historical context. Unlike preserved steam locomotives that gradually fade into museum nostalgia, the Class 05 disappeared entirely. That absence elevated it from achievement to legend. It became a symbol of unrealized potential rather than a relic of the past. Some questions are never answered. They echo in the silence left behind. Questions that could have rewritten history. What if just one had survived as a living, breathing machine? Would its very existence have shattered our assumptions about the limits of steam? Could it have proven that steam's peak wasn't a dead end, but a road abandoned? Would the entire story of speed on rails have been written differently? We'll never know. The only machines capable of answering are ghosts. So the Class 05 leaves us with one colossal, haunting thought. What if Germany never gave up on her? So what do you think? Was the 05 a stroke of genius, born in the wrong era, or a breathtaking mistake, destined to fade into legend? Tell us your verdict in the comments, and if you're drawn to the stories of machines that blazed a trail and vanished into the smoke, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss any of our uploads. Thanks for tuning in.